Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about the road to revolution. So, we've already talked about the French and Indian War, we talked about the Enlightenment, which are both important events. Now, we're going to kind of review, go over some of the things that happened that led to the revolution. First big thing was the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War took place from 1756 to 1763. This was a 7-year war. And what happened is France and Great Britain battle for North America. And so what? Why is this important? It is important because France loses and leaves North America. Great Britain takes Ohio Valley, but the war cost Great Britain a lot of money. And to help pay the war debts, Britain starts to tax the colonists. And there's also the Proclamation of 1763 that says colonists cannot settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. So you have to remember, before the French and Indian War, Britain had a policy of salutary neglect. That's where they kind of let the colonies do whatever they want. They didn't make laws, they didn't really tax them. It was kind of just, they're free to do what they want. But after the war, they start to tax them, and they start telling them what to do. They start making laws. They start saying you can't move west of the Appalachian Mountains. And the colonists do not like that. Now, this is just real quick a picture of what North America looked like before the French and Indian War. You can see the purple is England, orange is French, green is Spain. But after the French and Indian War, you notice France leaves. They're no longer there. Britain takes all of this, and France actually gives all of this to Spain. So Spain gets a little bit more. So here are some more important events. The first important one is the Sugar Act. And this happened in 1764. It's just a tax on sugar and molasses. And this was the first tax on colonists. They don't like it. And Britain gets more money because of this. Stamp Act. This was in 1765, and it's a tax on paper, so documents, newspapers, certificates. And colonists don't like this tax either, and they actually start protesting in the streets. Another event is the Boston Massacre. This happened in 1770. And what happened is British troops fired on anti-British demonstrators. So these were people protesting, saying they don't like England, and the soldiers shot and fired into the crowd, and British soldiers killed 5 colonists. And why is this important? It was the first American/colonist blood spill. So it was the first time people that lived in the colonies were killed by the British. And it also, tensions increased. And tension is just like where you get upset. So the colonists started to get really upset with Britain. The next big event is the Boston Tea Party, which happened in 1773. And this is when colonists dressed up as Native Americans and walked onto British boats and threw tea in Boston Harbor. So remember, England had a tea tax. They started taxing the colonists for tea, and back then colonists loved tea. They drank tons and tons of tea. So they were very upset. They dressed up as Native Americans and they threw all the tea into the ocean. But so what? Why is this important? The British closed the Boston Harbor. So remember, when it's closed, you can't trade. If you own a business, you can't do anything there. And a military government starts in Massachusetts. So Britain sends lots of the military to Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is no longer allowed to govern themselves. So they can't make laws, they can't have a governor, they can't vote for anything. And Massachusetts at the time had town meetings. Remember, the Puritans had direct democracy where everybody votes. Well, not anymore. Nobody's voting. England's there. They have the military. They're not letting them govern themselves. So there's the First Continental Congress, and this happened in 1774. So colonists, they meet to discuss problems and agree to arm militias, which when you see militias, that just means military army. And so essentially a bunch of the colonists from all the different colonies, like from Virginia and Massachusetts and Rhode Island, they all met and they start talking about how bad England is. And this is important because Americans are preparing to fight the British. And the colony of Georgia did not send representatives. So out of the 13 colonies, Georgia was the only colony that did not send representatives. Next is the battles of Lexington and Concord. So these are actually two different battles on the same day. What happened is the British troops went to Lexington to destroy some weapons, and when they got there, the colonists started shooting. They killed a bunch of British soldiers, but then the British left Lexington and they went to Concord to destroy some weapons as well. But there they met even more colonists, and the colonists killed a bunch of the British soldiers and actually won this battle. So what happened, I just explained. American colonists fight British troops and win. So the American colonists win. The British troops do not win. 8 Americans killed at Lexington. Dozens more die in Concord. And why is this important? Colonists feel confident they can beat the British. They're starting to think, you know what, the British aren't that bad. Maybe we can win a war against them. It's also important, though, because England and colonists no longer talk. They no longer really negotiate. They're not trying to have peace. They kind of stop talking. And then there's the Second Continental Congress. So really this is just a big meeting, but this one was a meeting to plan for war. Essentially the colonists, they decided we are going to go to war with England. And it's important, the so what, because American colonists plan war. And George Washington was named the leader of the Continental Army. And George Washington later goes on to become our first president. The Declaration of Independence, that happened in 1776. And American colonies declared their independence from England. So all the colonies signed the Declaration. It was just a piece of paper. And what they're saying is they are independent from England. They're no longer part of England, and that the United States is its own country now. England did not like that. They're going to go and start a war, and the United States has to fight to become a country. And so what is Thomas Jefferson wrote this document. People are going to fight for a new way of life. So if they want change, England's not going to give it to them. They have to fight for it. And America is no longer part of England and becomes a new country. Don't worry about this part right here. Next, we're going to learn about the differences among colonists. So there's 3 different viewpoints that colonists had. The first one is people that are called patriots, and they believed in complete independence from Britain, so they did not want to be part of Britain. They were inspired by the ideas of Locke and Paine and the words of Virginian Patrick Henry. And Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And liberty is kind of like freedom. He's saying, I want to be free, and if I'm not going to be free, you might as well kill me, because he's saying with the English, you were not free. But if we become our own country, then you will be. And the patriots, they provided the troops for the American army, led by Virginian George Washington. When we say Virginia, it's just somebody from Virginia. But the patriots, they're the ones that wanted to fight England. So they were the people in the army. They hired people to be in the army. They gave weapons. They gave clothes. Next, there's people called loyalists, also known as Tories. And they wanted to remain loyal to Britain because of cultural and economic ties. So these are people that still liked England. They believed that taxation of the colonies was justified to pay for British troops to protect European settlers from American Indian attacks. So they thought, I don't care if we pay taxes, that's fine, because if we pay taxes, England's gonna provide troops to protect us. So for them, they wanted to remain part of England. They didn't mind that they were English. They were loyal to England. That's why they're called loyalists. Lastly, there were some people who were neutrals, and neutral just means in the middle, and many colonists who tried to stay as uninvolved in the war as possible. So they didn't take a side, they weren't going to fight, and there was a lot of people like this. When the war was actually taking place, some of the wars were on their battlefield, they helped both sides, but they didn't take a side, they were indifferent. England's war effort, so what you have to know is Britain had a more powerful, well-trained, and well-equipped army and navy. So more powerful means it's bigger, it had better weapons. Their army was trained. These people have been in the army for a very long time. And well-equipped, they had better armies, they had more boats, they had more cannons. However, the war lost popular support back in Britain. So what that means is actually back in England, the people who lived there, they didn't really care about the war. They didn't want to have the colonies anymore. A lot of people said we should just quit, or that the British should just quit. In the colonial war effort, so American colonists had the advantage of fighting a defensive war. And all that means is that they kind of could hide in hills, they can hide in places because they were trying to protect something. They weren't moving and trying to attack anyone. But they also had desire and understanding the land. So by understanding the land, they knew where the mountains were, they knew where there was caves, they knew where the rivers were, they knew how to get around. And they had committed political leadership. So people that were fighting wanted to fight. These people were literally willing to lose their lives to start a new country. And finally, there's colonial victory. And the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga, which is in 1777, led to the Treaty of Alliance with France by Ben Franklin. And the American victory at the Battle of Yorktown, 1781, under the command of George Washington with the assistance of the French Army and Navy. So Battle of Saratoga, really that's important because this led to a Treaty of Alliance with France. So a guy named Ben Franklin, he was an American colonist, very important in the government. He got actually France to help out the United States. So the war ended up being France and the United States against England. And then the American victory at the Battle of Yorktown under the command of George Washington with the assistance of the French Army and Navy. And this was the last big war. Really, after this war, the United States won. England really didn't fight anymore. And we really were only able to win because France helped us out. We didn't have a navy, like boats. France provided lots of boats for the war. And this is just kind of an example where, well, this is where the British surrendered. The red people are the British. Then we had all of our soldiers, and then we had the French boats. So the British had nowhere to go, and that's where they surrendered, and the war essentially was over then. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.